All right. I'm here with Caitlin Watkins from Best Friends Animal Society, and she was extremely generous and offered to do a Q&A session with us, just to tell us a little bit about the organization that we're raising funds for and what they do and how we can help and how those of you who donate during this event, how your money is going to go and all the good that it's going to do. So Caitlin, why don't you start off a little bit just by kind of telling us your role at Best Friends Animal Society, what pets you have, how long you've been there, that kind of stuff.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I'm Caitlin, and I've been at Best Friends for 3 years now. I oversee all of our peer-to-peer fundraising programs, so digital fundraising in general. That includes, of course, live stream fundraising, as well as social media fundraising, and all of our other kind of walk and digital events that we hold. So it's been a wonderful last 3 years. I was so passionate about this space, particularly because I have my own animal, my dog Jolene, who has been life-changing. Honestly, she's such a great companion. And I adopted her about 6 years ago from Austin Pets Alive here, where I live in Austin, Texas. And she has just been a life-changing pet for me. She's a three-legged pit bull. She has a little red-nosed pitty, and she has attitude for days and a lot of wrinkles. But kind of working at Best Friends, I've been able to see very similar cases. Jolene came in as a pretty big medical case. She got hit by a car while she was a pregnant dog in the middle of the road, just got hit. And so Austin Animal Center, which is the local animal shelter here in Austin, picked her up, the animal control officers did. And she, needed a lot of work. So she completely fractured her leg and her head, and her medical list is really long. So APA was able to take her in and do all the surgery required to adopt her out. At that point, I adopted her, and she's just been a wonderful animal. So I could wax on about her forever. But really, there are so many stories like hers that, pets are a part of our families, and this work that we're doing to both, keep pets with their families in hard times like this year has been, but also to, create new families with pets, with dogs and cats. So Best Friends has been around since 1986, so a while now, 36 years total. And we've been operating primarily in the early years through the largest no-kill sanctuary in the country, which is in Kanab, Utah, which is southern Utah. And that sanctuary actually holds 1,700 animals. So you have dogs, cats, we have horses and donkeys and pigs and goats. We also have a wildlife rehabilitation center there. And so at any given day, there's 1,700 animals kind of in flux. So that destination, really started the work of no-kill across the country and kind of the helm. So at this point, Best Friends has expanded and now has life-saving centers in LA, Los Angeles, in New York City, in Atlanta, in Houston. We're opening a new one. We just opened a center in Northwest Arkansas, as well as Salt Lake City. So we're kind of spread out across the country, and we have adoption centers where animals are able to be adopted out. And we also work a lot with shelters and rescues across the country. So we work with over 4,000 animal rescues and shelters. Those are called our network partners. And we basically collaborate to reach no-kill by 2025. That is our main mission. So it involves a lot of work, of course, a lot of data analysis, a lot of study, but also, the on-the-ground work of noses in, noses out, how we can adopt animals, how we can promote fostering, basically all of the different tools and resources we have in our toolkits to make sure that pets go home or they're not euthanized for lack of space.
And you had mentioned in the shelter in Utah that there's about 1,700 animals.
Mm-hmm.
Are a lot of those animals adopted from the reserve, or is that kind of they go there and that's where they get to enjoy, however long
Yes.
they're
Yes. So actually, because it's the largest no-kill sanctuary, no animal that goes there will ever, be euthanized, essentially, unless it's humanely or, it's kind of their end of life or their really sick. So that is the beautiful thing about that space. And a lot of adoptions do happen out of there. We receive around 30,000 visitors a year to the sanctuary. So we constantly have people volunteering, visiting, and adopting animals from there. It is relatively remote. So, it happens at its own pace. Like this past year has been a little bit challenging for volunteers and visitors, but we do see a lot of adoptions out of our space. But, we really became popularized during the Michael Vick case, I would say, is like really where we got national recognition. And that's because we took in a lot of the dogs, actually 19 of the dogs in the Michael Vick dogfighting ring. So that was like the biggest part, I think, of our national work in getting that recognition. And all of those dogs were evaluated. So they went through a court case and they were evaluated each individually for their behavior. We were able to keep 19 of the most, behavioral at-risk dogs at the shelter until their end of life. This past year, we actually lost the last two, which was, a hard transition, but it had been definitely up to 10 years. So it, was their time, but they lived really happy, healthy lives up until then. We were also able to adopt out a few of the animals. So actually they were able to find homes based on that court order. So a lot of them weren't able to be adopted, but the ones that were had been adopted and also live super happy, healthy lives. So yes, we absolutely have a lot of animals there for extended stays. And we actually do a lot of transport work across the country. So within our life-saving centers, if there's animals that have spent a lot of time in any particular center and they're basically, holding a spot and not getting adopted, we'll transport them to the sanctuary where they're able to either get adopted or, have a longer term stay. So that is something that we also do. We had an amazing animal. I have like a super like heart spot for older pity girls, like my dog Jolene. And we had one transport this past year. Her name is Sheena, and she was much older. She was diabetic, gray nose pit, blue nose pit. Who was at the New York Life Saving Center, and she had been there for a couple years. She was required some water therapy and acupuncture, like more of the medical treatment that we could really provide at the New York Center. And so she was transported across the country to the sanctuary in Utah, and she lived out a happy, healthy life there. So there's plenty of examples like that, where just because animals aren't able to be adopted doesn't mean that they don't get to live happy, healthy lives.
Yeah, which is awesome. And like the one thing that really drew me to Best Friends Animal Society was I just love that idea. All of our pets have always been rescues, and just that idea that even if it's a hard time finding homes for certain pets, that they're still animals, and amazing animals, and they deserve to be happy. So I love that you guys have that opportunity for them.
Absolutely. Yes. It's a lot of that on the ground work and animal, of course. And then also, the infrastructure and the institutional change that needs to happen in order to reach that really lofty goal. Every single day, shelters are killing 1,700 animals. So that's around 625,000 animals a year that are dying in shelters because of lack of space. And that's extremely lofty goal to narrow it down to 0 by 2025. So there's a lot of things lately too that we've really been focusing on and honing in our advocacy and legislation work. Primarily, I live in Texas, so we're working on breed discrimination in housing and public housing primarily. So a lot of legislation has gone through actually in the most recent legislative session here in Texas. Around, bills that would prevent discrimination in public housing and other things, primarily with this past year and it being such a hard time for a lot of people. The legislation and advocacy that is required to keep pets with their families. We were talking about how a lot of people adopted animals this past year, which is wonderful. A lot of people also fostered, and foster succeeded, as we call it, instead of foster failed. We find fostering to be a great way to actually get animals into homes, forever homes. But a lot of people did foster and adopt this past year. And as people kind of ease their way back into office life or into a more kind of normal working environment, I think there is concern about like what those animals will do. And there's been some reports that, there's more intakes of animals at shelters, but it's also kitten season. It's a hard time of year for shelters, particularly because a lot of kittens are being born. And so, there's a lot of obviously things going on in that space, but I think just providing people with the tools and the resources they need in order to keep pets in homes. And that is kind of the essence of what we're working on right now as this whole world is changing so rapidly.
Yep. And that actually leads me to my next question. I know that you mentioned how there were a lot of adoptions with everyone being quarantined for the last year and a half or so.
Right.
And now we're starting to see, numbers starting to go up potentially because situations change or whatever the case may be. What are some of maybe the other consequences, either positive or negative, that you've seen from COVID? And do you think there's going to be any impact still from that when it comes to both animal welfare and the work that you all do over the next 3 to 5 years?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, adoptions were soaring, and that was actually one silver lining of this whole situation. Super dire circumstances for the entire world. But I think there was a raised awareness around pets in homes and adoption particularly, and, the animals most at risk. And so definitely, I hope that kind of continues, that when people think about adopting an animal, they're not going to a breeder and they're going to their local animal shelter, because that's like the way that we're going to save the most lives moving forward. And, we also had really amazing save rates. So we have this 90% benchmark for reaching no kill, which means that 90% of the animals that go into shelters actually come out. And the 10% that is left is, they're either medically in a place where they're, euthanizing them is actually the most humane thing to do. They have such significant behavioral issues where they could no longer live a happy, healthy life in a home. Other things like that like that remaining 10%. So reaching 90% this year, we reached 90% in LA this year. So that is actually one of our biggest markets. We've been working in LA for decades now, actually trying to organize shelters and rescues to reach that benchmark and save more lives. And so we reached that 90% benchmark this year, which was super exciting to announce. In a hard time, of course, it was a hard time for a lot of people, but it was an exciting announcement. And so I think the save rates have been up in cities like that, where people are adopting and rescuing more just because there's more awareness out there. And, animals provide a bright spot for us. And I don't know who in this last year hasn't relied on a furry friend for some warmth and some solace. So I think that is absolutely what we've seen. And, I've heard people talk about separation anxiety, and all of those things are happening. There's, of course, many resources out there for training and for keeping pets in homes. So we have a lot of those resources on our YouTube channel as far as dog training and behavioral training. And of course, there's always a lot of support and resources at the shelter level for that kind of training as well. There's a lot of discounts for actual dog trainers, but also classes and things like that really are very helpful. And I've definitely taken advantage of those in the past.
Yeah, and I've been on the Best Friends Animal Society YouTube page a few times, and you do have a lot of not only like helpful educational videos, but some of your like commercials or kind of shorts are also really hilarious, and I find myself like chuckling at them quite a bit. So it's good to have be able to see like, oh, what's the best way to train this, or things to avoid, but then also some of like the commercials that you guys have are just genuinely funny. and entertaining. So
Thank you. That means a lot. Yeah, we work hard on that, and we get a lot of pro bono help from different advertising agencies and whatnot, creative agencies who help us produce those videos, which is wonderful. We just produced one, and it was around the Friends premiere, the new Friends season. So we did one with kittens, which is very good content. Highly recommend it.
I will definitely check that out.
Yeah.
So we've talked some about how you guys work with state and federal government, I'm assuming, for like changing laws and pushing things towards that 90% mark that you're looking for, and changing some of the regulations around pet ownership. And we talked some about the sanctuary and working some with the shelters. So when people make donations to Best Friends Animal Society, what are the different ways that that money gets used? How does that go to helping animals either directly or indirectly?
Yes, absolutely. It directly supports our work. So all of the life-saving work that we have across the country in, supporting animals at our sanctuary, and all of the food and the resources they need to live happy lives, as well as our life-saving centers. So all of the work that we're doing in places like New York, LA, Atlanta, Salt Lake City, Houston. There's, a lot of work that we do around transporting animals because, we've done the research, and the data shows that most killing is happening in the top 5 states. So we've really focused in on primarily programming in those areas, and programming does entail a lot of transport. So where we have a lot of animals, like here in Texas, that are being killed every year, we are transporting them to northern states, for example. In California, those go up to Washington and Oregon. So there's a lot of that infrastructure that happens in order to make sure that animals do, live and go into their own forever homes. And then, of course, the policy work that we're doing across the country too, at the state, at the local level, even like city ordinances, things like that, that really make an impact on animals' lives too. So all of your work and all of your donations and support go directly to the life-saving work that we do. And, we are privately funded. We have foundation grants and other, family foundation grants as well. But primarily we're supported through our donors, our individual members, and all of that support really allows us to bring the country to no kill and reach our mission.
And other than making donations, what are some ways that people can get involved to help either Best Friends Animal Society directly, or can kind of help with the work that you guys are doing? You mentioned like the reserve in Utah and how you have volunteers that work there sometimes, as well as like people visiting there. But for either people in Utah or people outside of that, difficult maybe to take that trip. Like, I couldn't go out there and volunteer for a weekend very easily.
Right.
So what are some kind of general things that we could do?
Absolutely. Yes. Beyond becoming a donor or choosing to host a live stream fundraiser, there are a lot of ways you can engage with Best Friends. We have a Discord channel, which is great and pretty active for our animal lovers in the house. So that's a really great way to engage on like a lot of different opportunities for volunteering or advocacy. And speaking of advocacy, we have an action team. It's called the 2025 Action Team. So that is an easy way, it's a volunteer opportunity to become involved in policy and advocacy and take action for the animals. We also can volunteer across the country. So we have a lot of, virtual engagement opportunities for volunteers. So whether it's, the action team or becoming involved in volunteering on the ground at the local life-saving centers, there's plenty of ways you can volunteer for Best Friends. So those are primarily the best ways to support our work.
Awesome. And I know that you guys also have like different events. I saw like a Strut Your Mutt, I think it was.
Yes. We have Strut Your Mutt launching in August, yes, and I also oversee that that program. It's going to be wonderful this year. It's going to be virtual entirely again this year, and we're looking to engage, new, younger followers. And we've had this event for 25 years now, so it's been on the ground. The primary focus of Strut Your Mutt has been raising money for network partners, so our shelters and rescues across the country. In the past This past year, we had, over 300 network partners raise money for their organizations, and a large majority of them raised significant amount of their operating funds through this event, which is super exciting. So Best Friends hosts it, and we also have opportunities to fundraise for Best Friends, but it's really a fundraiser for our network partner organizations. That's also a really great way to either volunteer or to fundraise.
Can you talk a little bit more about those network partners? Because I know like here in Michigan, where I'm from, you have a few different network partners all over, and there's a few actually in our county, in our area that you guys work with directly. What's the relationship between kind of the overhead of Best Friends and then each of the individual rescues or shelters, and like how do you guys help each other out?
Yes, exactly. So membership to become a network partner for Best Friends is entirely free. The only thing we require to join is actually their data. So that's how we are able to gather a lot of the data we have in our life-saving dashboard. And you can go online, I think it's bestfriends.org/2025 to see our dashboard and see nailed down to your community where the most killing is happening, and like all the statistics of what's happening both in your community and across the country, and those primary states that I talked about: Texas, California, Georgia, North Carolina, Florida. So those resources are extremely helpful to kind of narrow down what's happening locally in your community. But so network partners, basically, they join, they give their data, and they receive access to all the resources and materials, things like Strut Your Mutt, but also webinars, events. We hold a conference every year that's actually coming up in June. And a lot of different resources basically for life saving. So it's basically a support network where people have access to those resources they need to reach no-kill. And it's been really, really helpful. A lot of them also, they're run under their own 501c3 organization umbrella. So we only distribute funds, grant funds from other foundations to our network partners if they qualify through our grant program. And so that's like a separate application process, but none of them, are under our 501c3 designation, if that makes sense.
It does. Yeah. So separate entities, but more collaborative than anything else. Yeah, exactly.
It's a great way to gather data first and foremost, but also to just provide resources and mentorship from, larger organizations like Best Friends or larger shelters to smaller shelters, and kind of share resources and best practices to reach the no-kill benchmark across the country. You have to kind of honestly work from the local level to the national level. So every single no-kill community we can build just brings us closer to that point.
Awesome. And then kind of last question I have for you. You mentioned how you had just recently hit that 90% no kill in Los Angeles. Over the past, I know you've been there 3 years, maybe 3 to 5 years. What have been some of the accomplishments, or kind of how have you seen the work that you guys do pay dividends because of the donations that people make? Like what, other than Los Angeles, what are some of the big changes or accomplishments you guys have had?
Yeah, so I talked about 625,000 animals a year dying in shelters. That number is down from 17 million when we first were doing all of this data work. So that's huge. That reduction in shelter killing is immense, unfathomable to me. And so just the awareness that we've built across the country and the impact we've had, basically we're able to measure the impact of a network partner working with us and how many more lives they're able to save. So it really goes down to every single animal being saved, every single animal having a story and having an impact. So I think that is the most tangential, tangible, goosebumpy type story, because those life saves are, those are families formed. Those are actual, pets that are able to live and, find homes. So I think that is, to me, what keeps me going every single day and doing this work. Because it's not always hard. There's a lot of roadblocks, or not always easy. There's a lot of roadblocks and things that stand in our way, but we're definitely making really big impact year over year. And we gather all of that data. And year over year, last year it was like 800,000 animals a year. And then this year has been 625. So that like reduction in shelter killing is just, to me, makes a huge impact. And that's where the donations are going directly.
Awesome. Yeah. And that's huge. I mean, from 17 million to a little over 600,000, that's a huge, huge drop.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, it is. Like, it's kind of mind blowing trying
It
to
is.
process, exactly what that means. And it's crazy.
Yes, truly. And, we have a long way to go in the next 4 years, but really from where we come from, it's so far and so much progress. So, and that takes every single person acting and every single person being an advocate. So that's just the beauty of it. And, I think there's a lot of ways to engage with best friends, of course. And the content that we have is pretty joyous because we really try to focus on the positive. And while the work we do can be grim, you're talking about shelter killing, it's not a happy subject. The animals themselves are what we do it for. So all of our social media channels are always very super positive and our content's really great. So that's another way you can really engage and support if you don't have the time or bandwidth to fundraise or donate right now. There's a lot of ways that you can really become involved.
That's awesome. I appreciate you taking the time to talk with me. I know last year we loved working with you guys, and we're super excited to work with you again this year and in years to come.
Absolutely.
And it's a great organization. You guys do amazing work. I love everything that you stand for. Is there kind of any last message or any kind of last ideas or anything else you'd just like to end this with and leave a lasting impression in people?
Yeah, I think I want to say thank you. Very grateful for taking the time to meet with me and to have me talk about all the work that we do at Best Friends. I just have a lot of gratitude for this community too. I mean, we've been able to make such a huge impact in this space, and I think there's even more potential and opportunity for growth and for community building. I kind of see it as a virtual no-kill community because the people are so passionate, and every single day I'm blown away by the generosity and the support of people like you. So thank you for your work and for supporting us.
Yeah, it's a privilege. Like you said, animals are important. We do this for Gracie, my dog that passed away last year. And it's a bittersweet thing to do, because you remember and think about things a little more closely than we already do on a day-to-day basis. But it's good that, we can use this to do something positive, and it's a privilege to get to help. So yeah, I appreciate it. I appreciate everything you guys do, and I'm looking forward to a successful fundraising for you.
It's going to be great. Thank you so much.